All right, welcome everybody to our final Seadog series of the season. I'm going to have Mike Webb come up and introduce our guest and all the goodies he's got.
I don't see anybody who doesn't know me.
I don't know you.
Hang on a second. I thought Pete was going to talk for a while. I thought he was a little more long-winded than that. Okay, I'm Mike Webb, for those of you who don't know me. And I am a boater. So it's an addiction. So today we got Brian Kieb here, and he works for Petit Paint. And I read his little bio here. I worked for Petit Paint for over 30 years. Started in the factory warehouse, probably like I did at West Marine as a stock boy. And then on the quality control lab, and then outside sales rep. So I've dealt with Brian for probably, 20 years or so now. And he's helped this club, and y'all don't even know it. Back before the new barn, I used to take the lasers home and paint them. And one time I called Brian, and I said, I called Petit Tech Support. And they gave me Brian. And I said, I don't want a salesman, I want a tech guy. But it turns out Brian is the tech guy too. So he actually came to my house, and I had this laser there, and the paint job wasn't coming out real good. And he gave me some expert advice. He says, first of all, you're using Interlux paint, and you're supposed to be using Petit. So, but he did tell me the formula if I did insist on using Interlux. So he's not totally, devoid of empathy for us, So he has helped me on different occasions. He probably helped some of y'all on different occasions, come out to the marinas and, looked at the paint job and gave you some advice or something like that. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian. We've got an hour. If it takes longer than that, he said he'll answer any questions you got. And at the end of the hour, we'll probably stop the formal thing, but he's going to be up here, and you can come and ask him all the questions you want to. So without further ado, Mr. Brian.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Yep, my name's Brian. I've been with Petit for 30-some-odd years. I can't believe that's how long it's been. So I've known the Webb family, I guess, since the late 90s, since West Marine, Hampton. The other location before I got moved. So just to let you know. Can you hear me back there? Everybody's good? Okay. I talked to Mike on this seminar. I did the Zoom one a couple years ago. I don't know if anybody remembers that, but I did that as well. And I've noticed all of you looking over here. See this table? I don't want to take anything back. So yes, this is all going to be for you guys. So if you give me a chance, we'll go through it all. But talking with Mike, basically he wanted me to go over some bottom paints and also some epoxy repairs. And after that, that'll probably take up the hour, and we can get into some of that other stuff. Yes, I will hang around with anybody's questions. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation or anything like that, so we're going to fire away at me for your questions as well, okay? This is going to be an intimate type of scenario seminar talking, so if you got questions, please receive to me, and we'll go through them. Because your question might be somebody else's question as well, so don't worry about it. But first we want to get into the bottom paints, and basically there are two different types of bottom paints. Are we all familiar with that? There are the soft paints, or called ablative paints, and then there's the hard modified epoxy leaching copper paints, or we call them hard. So we either call them soft for ablative or hard for the hard bottom paints. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. I'm going to try to keep this generic, but I am going to use my own products to explain which are which. The Trinidad line that we have, the Petit Trinidad line, I know some of you guys have already talked to me, are using that. Anything that says Trinidad in the Petit line is a hard bottom paint. Everything else that Petit has is either a semi-hard or an ablative paint. So the only true hard bottom paint that Petit has left is Trinidad. We have 5 different lines of Trinidad, and there's like a copper load for each one. But that is it. If it says Trinidad, it's a hard bottom paint. If it says anything else from Petit, it is somewhat of a soft or an ablative paint. Basically, our two bread and butters are the Trinidad for hard, and then the Odyssey family for the ablatives. Okay. Some of you guys might have Interlux or Seahawk or that type of thing. That's fine for right now, but we'll get you over to Petit in a minute. Okay. So the way they work very simply is the ablative lines are starting to become more of the market because they're easier to apply. They don't have a buildup. You can trailer them, and you can have them come in and out of the water. You can have it come out this past November and splash it this coming spring, and it won't have a problem. That's the reason that the hard paints are starting to slowly evaporate away, because they need to stay in the water all the time. Okay, and if they come out, you got to repaint them. Even if you have a good coat of paint on there, you have to repaint it, because the problem with the hard bottom paints is they work like a sponge. So everybody picture a sponge in your head. They have those tiny little holes, and when you put a sponge in the water absorbs into those little holes. That's how the paints work. That's actually how they work. They absorb the water, and then the hard paints actually leach out the anti-fouling properties, or the copper, mostly in Trinidads. And it even works with the ablatives that way. They absorb the water, but the movement of the boat basically helps leach it out and kind of smooths it out so it wears away. Do we understand pretty much that's the 101 for hard bottom paints versus ablative bottom paints. Can you hear me? Am I doing okay? Okay. Any questions on that? Yes, sir. If you have a hard bottom paint on there and it's working, if you got it out for a repair or that type of thing, you got a couple weeks. But then you might start to notice that it'll dry out and it'll get chalky. And that is starting to tell you the tell sign that the paint is actually starting to dry out and shrink. And that's what happens. As the paint is shrinking, those little holes are shrinking too, so there's no way for the anti-fouling to be released out. One thing you can do to correct it without having to paint it is a light sand to the whole boat. Now, the problem is with a hard, this is just with a hard bottom paint, and if it comes out and want to put it back in without painting, that's what I'm going with here. If you do that, you remember, human error, we're all human here, we're probably not going to scuff it every which way. You might still have a little bit of fouling here or there. Just remember that, okay? Does that make sense? If you have it out for a repair and it's been out of the water for a month, it's the tail end of the summer, and you don't want to put another coat of paint on because it's very expensive, so you put it back in. Scratch it up a little bit and then put it back in the water. But if you don't scratch it up good enough, you might have some fouling issues, but that's just the nature of the beast. Does that make sense? Okay? If you want to sit out there 24/7, absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. So that's kind of why the ablatives are starting to become the stronger hold of the bottom paints. We're all working to it, but there are those where Trinidad is a needed product as well. A lot of sailors, I would assume there's a lot of sailing in here. A lot of times that boat is just sitting in the water, and this is where the hard paints actually become an advantage. You don't move as fast, or it's sitting a long period of time. It's hard to come out. Longevity. These are all reasons we keep the Trinidad line. All of these reasons. We usually have them heavily loaded with the biocides so they can last for 2, 3, maybe even 4 years. We warranty it for 1, but basically they can last a longer time. Where the ablatives, as you're using that boat, you're wearing away that paint. Okay? Divers. I like to talk about divers. This is where I get in trouble. Anybody have a diver that goes on their boat? Okay. Okay. How many of you have hard bottom paint on those? 1, 2, 3. How many have ablative on there that are having divers? Okay. They're doing 2 things. They're cleaning your boat, but at the same time, depending on what they use, they could be also taking paint off. Because again, ablatives wear from friction. So if a diver's going down there with a Scotch-Brite pad, a wool pad or something of that nature, or even a scraper, he's taking some paint off. So just remember that. So sometimes a diver might come and go, hey, your paint's coming off. It's not coming off. He's taking it off, okay? So we got to just be careful of the difference of there. If he's getting a bloom or a cloud, he's done it. If it's chipping off all the way down, then we have a situation. So I get, let's see, it's February, so come April here, I'll probably get about a call or 2 a day saying that a diver told me my paint's coming off. What's happening? And 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, the diver is rubbing the paint off. okay? And as the paint gets older, again, if you got 2 coats on there and it's on its 2nd or 3rd season, the paint has weakened itself down. The diver actually, even if he's scrubbing it the same way, it's broken down so much that he could be actually finishing the job, if that makes sense, okay? So we got to keep an eye on those things. They're needed. We're not eliminating a diver's job. I'm not telling you not to use a diver, but you just got to be careful sometimes when you have a blade of paints, no matter whose it is. I don't care if it's mine or his or hers or Interlux or Seahawks. When they're a blade of paints and the diver's down there scrubbing, he can take some of the product off, okay? Everybody understand? Huh? Yeah. Well, some ablatives are softer than others, and they were designed that way. So sometimes a diver just might use his gloves or just a rag or a sponge, and some will basically, if there are some type of fouling issues with some barnacles, he might have a scraper somewhere tucked away so he can pop them off. You just got to be careful. I'm not trying to eliminate divers. That's what I'm not trying to do. I'm just make sure communication between the diver and you know what's on that boat. If he knows what kind of paint's on there, he'll understand. Okay.
Isn't that good for a blader to get a
Yeah.
layer on it?
Right.
Layer has pressure.
Right. But my like I said,
Don't want to overdo it.
you don't want to overdo it because you're cutting down on the longevity of that paint where you'll have to paint it sooner than later. Mike, I saw your hand up. Huh? Right. Yeah, okay. Right. Right. You just got to be careful. That's all. I just wanted to point that out. You had a question.
The Petit Guardian for like running gear, is that a ablative or what?
Well, it's a hybrid. It's in the middle. It's basically because we know where it's going to be. There's a lot of friction going on there. We want it to hold up. If it was an ablative, it would wear off a little bit too quickly. Okay, that's kind of in that hybrid stage. We have it where it will wear down because we don't want paint buildup on the props and the shafts, but we don't want it ablating because of the spin or the turn of the RPMs of the props. So it's kind of in the middle. Okay. Any other questions on any of those things? Any questions from you guys? Any situations? Somebody had about the Trinidad. You. Okay. Yep. We've come out with a new one called Trinidad XSR. Okay. And basically it's a triple biocide product. The one thing that EPA is doing with us is they want us to lower the metals in the paints because they do pollute. We kind of have a catch-22 problem here where we're looking to keep the stuff off your boat without polluting the waters and killing the fish. And we have a pesticide product going on the bottom of a boat. We kind of have a catch-22 problem here. So what EPA is doing to us is they want us to keep lowering the metals, copper, zinc, and everything else, and find other compounds. So what Trinidad XSR is actually, it does have a form of copper in there, but a lower amount. We have a product, a compound in there called echinacea, which actually substitutes for the copper, and we also have a small amount of zinc, so that's the triple biocide, okay? They're all active ingredients. Anytime we're talking about those products, they're active, any metals, and anything else like the resins, the rosins, the solvents, they're called inert. They're not, so we can change the leach rate, yes. But we have to register these. We're not allowed to just make up a formula and go, okay, it's a new can. We actually have to go. We have to go to EPA. We have to go to OSHA. They have to approve it. Then it has to come back. It has to get registered federally and then statewide. So that's one reason where how come paint costs so much? There's a lot of money on the back scenes that you guys don't realize that cost. California? Well, California actually isn't the active ingredients. It's actually the VOCs. They're the solvents. The VOCs are volatile organic compounds. That's actually when you paint a boat and what you're smelling is the VOCs. And that's where California and Washington, New York, and even Florida a little bit, you have to meet their requirements. So we have that as well. And we can't make a California paint and we can't make a New York paint. And we're not going to we have to make it generalized, so we have to have it for everybody. So that's kind of what we've done is tried to take the best of all the worlds in our situations and make products as we go. We're also looking in the future for other things to actually lower metals as well. Again, we good? Okay. So for your question is Trinidad XSR. With the triple biocide, since we're doing this, yes, it is expensive, but the product is warranted for 24 months. So we've actually backed it with that product. So for your situation, from what we discussed up here, when it's time, you've got the Trinidad Pro with the Ergorol. SR, yeah. Well, SR stands for Ergorol for me. That's the name of SR, really. So that's kind of when it's time for you, sand and apply 2 coats of Trinidad XSR. You'll probably even get longer than what you have with the Pro. Or the SR, excuse me, French. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. It's 2023. This is a scientific answer. Spit your hand, wipe your hand. If you get a lot of product on your hand, you probably have a soft paint. It's kind of what the divers are doing, okay? If you don't have a lot on there, you're going to get some no matter what. But if your whole hand is full, you've got a soft paint. If you don't, you probably have a hard. Another way to say is if you look at the paints, ablatives will wear away. They'll start to look smooth. When all these paints go on, they kind of have that ripple look to it, what we call orange peel. If you ever look at an orange peel, it all looks a little rough. That's how these paints, the finishes are once you're done. If you're starting to notice above the waterline, it still has that ripple look because the water hasn't worn that away, but below it, it seems to be smoother. That's another idea that you have an ablative. And then if you do see any worn out spots that have gotten down to primer, chances are you have an ablative. If you have areas where it's chipping away, usually up at the waterline and everything, back down to the gel coat and that, you might have a hard. Those are kind of all the telltale signs. But it's 2023. I would love to have something where I could zap on there and go, you got an ablative or you got a hard. But we don't do that. Yes, sir. Very good question. Basically, hard and soft. Use those 2 terms in your head. You can put soft on hard. You cannot put hard on soft for the fact that ablating or wearing away of a soft paint, and if you put a hard on there, that ablation underneath they're still going to want to peel away. It would take off that fine coat of paint that you guys just paid for, and it's going to be worn off. So you got to go back down to base. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Pretty much almost all the way. You don't have to take it completely off, but I call it the zebra effect or, leopard effect, where you're going to have little splotches that have been sanded into the gel coat or into the primer. That's what you need to get to. Yep. Well, I'm glad you said that. Well, first off, this is the paint can. It's the best tasting paint can you'll ever have. Okay? But we have Hydrocoat, which is the green label. It's 25 years in the making. We were the first ones to come out with an ablative paint that was a water-based product. To also answer your question, with the Hydrocoats, one thing, the best advantage to the Hydrocoat is because it's an ablative and it is a water base, it won't attack other paints as strongly that it's going to go over top of. This product can go over anything, any other bottom paint. So yes, we've been very successful for 25 years. This has been our #1 product up in New England, and I actually think it's still our #1 product by volume for Petit paint for almost 20-some years. Easy product. It's even easier to use than solvent-based ablatives, where this would be once you come out of the water, you power wash it, let it dry, maybe scrub it with a Scotch-Brite pad a little bit here or there while it's still a little wet or damp. Since that's water and this is water, you can apply. You're good to go. Yes, sir.
That's what I've been using on my little tender.
That's what this is, the Hydrocoat.
I bought it from West,
Okay.
but it's blue
Okay.
and how long does it last?
Well, it is an ablative paint. And one thing we say with ablative paints is a coat a season, more or less. So that doesn't mean, okay, if I put on 10 coats, I don't have to paint for 10 years. It doesn't work that way either, okay? We usually recommend 2 to 3 coats of paint, and that's it. If you put any more, it's a high buildup. So I would say if you have 2 coats on there or 3, you could probably get to 2 to 3, maybe even 4 years. You probably have 2, so.
The boat gets water in it, it goes down below where it's painted, and you get barnacles on that.
Waterline needs to be painted higher.
The other thing I found out, when it just sits out in the sun, I can pop those barnacles off with my thumbnail.
That's the whole intent.
I thought the barnacle glue, the glue on the barnacles was harder than
Well, it's their footing, but yeah, we'll call it glue.
pop right up. I was really surprised.
Yeah. Yep. Nope. That's what the bottom paints are intended to do. Either. On what? This will, water-based paints can go on any type of bottom paints. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
So with the hard paint,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't blade away,
Right.
how often do you have to all of it?
Telltale sign when you start to see it mud crack or chip off, or you've got, I call it pox, some kids who've had bad acne and then they have the pox looks on their cheeks. If you've got that at the waterline, that's a telltale sign that it's time that you've got a lot of paint film on there and it's time to strip off. 8 years, I would say over 10 to 12 coats usually is kind of that. If you're going to put on 2 a year, you're looking at anywhere between 5 to 8 years that you might need to. Yes, all the above. Basically, the most expensive, but cheap, I don't want to say cheapest, the most expensive but easiest would be a sandblast. The hardest and the worst one is actually paint stripper. Yeah, because you're trying to put stripper on top of something that's going to be dripping down, so it's going to be hard for it to hold up to and everything else. But you can do it. So, and sanding and scraping is the other one. And the thing is what I find out with hard bottom paints a lot of people do is they don't really strip it all off. They just keep feathering those areas that have been chipped away. They kind of feather them out and then they paint over that for 2 years, and then when a boat comes out there's another spot, and then they'll do the same thing over and over and over again. But that is the telltale signs of why ablatives are becoming more the market and not the hard bottom paints. Okay?
We had a Wormley Creek, and my boat used to, when I had it, it used to last for about 4 years.
Okay? Word.
I say up in the head of Wormley Creek.
Right.
I mean, maybe it wasn't quite as salty.
You got brackish water. Yes, correct. Mm-hmm. Yep. And are you still getting that?
I don't have the boat anymore.
So it's lasting forever for you.
I gave it to my cousin whose father had built it.
Okay, so forever.
So, are there any paints that are for, I guess, this general area that are like way overkill or way underkill?
Great question, Mike. Actually, if you guys go to the store, the West Marine stores or everything else, you see all these paints. And I always use the analogy, I'm looking for toothpaste. Just follow me on this, and we'll get back to the paint in a minute. I just want to find Crest regular paste, and you go to the supermarket or the CVS, and you find whitening agent, you find this, you find that, you find with gel and everything else, and then I think I've got it, and I go home and I open it up and I got the gel. Okay? The bottom paints are the same way. We have a gazillion of them. So I can see how it can be intimidating for people when they look up and they see it all. And unfortunately, I'm not blaming West, because the stores are so big and we ask them to carry so much. They've got all of this paint that is mine. They have all my competitors' paint, and then they have the topside paint over here, and then they have the varnishes and the primers and this and that. Oh my God, where's my paint? So yeah, there are certain paints for certain areas, and that's where I'm getting back to your question here. We have, that's one reason we have so many is there's certain paints that work for up in New England and that it costs less. And down here, where they're kind of like the middle grade paints, which we'll get to in a second, and then down in Florida, which they're the premium paints. And most of the West stores carry them all, even if they're here, there, or everywhere. So what Mike's asking me is what products actually work good here. And actually, the HydroCoat is one of them, and then the Odyssey HD, which are our 2 middle grade paints. And we actually have a promotion on them, where it's $50 off a gallon for HydroCoat and $25 off for Odyssey HD. These are our 2 probably best premium paints for here in Virginia, North Carolina, and Maryland. So we actually have a rebate for you guys that you guys can come and get if you want to use those. But we have the Trinidad, huh? How much is a gallon? A gallon? It's $200. Okay. So actually, most of the paints are getting up to be over, I think the Hydrocoat is at $200, and I think Odyssey is just over 200, like 225. Yes, you do. But this is where I want to show you where price sometimes, I understand, you can pay me now, or you can pay me later. If you want to buy that $100 paint, okay, over here, you got to paint again next year, and you got to paint again, and you got to paint again. With that $400 paint, you only had to paint it once in all that time. So that's one less time off the lift, in a yard, buying tape, buying rollers, buying this, buying that. There could be a cost savings, so don't always be intimidated by the price, okay? You do get what you pay for. The best place to source? Well, again, I've used in West Marine. That's where I've met the Webbs. West Marine's a good where if you're going to do it yourself, they usually have good prices. With all the, what can I say, all online shopping, there's some places up there that have good prices. If you're going to have the boatyard do it for you, chances are you're better off letting the boatyard pay for the product and bill you that way. A lot of boatyards are doing is if you bring the paint to them, they'll say, I'm not going to warranty that. I know it's Petit, I know it's Interlux, I know it's Seahawk, whatever. But they're going to say, you bought it, that's your warranty on that paint, okay? Where if they're going to paint it themselves and get the product for them, they'll know, they'll warranty the whole job. Okay, warranties basically if we have paint failures. What our product is supposed to do is keep fouling off your boat, okay? So if you get fouling within a month after it's been painted, that's where your warranty comes in. It's kind of a little bit of both, but it depends on slime and everything will be on your boat if you don't use your product, if you don't use your boat. So, but you should maintain it and keep it clean. But we're looking more for the shell growth than anything. But if you've got a lot of slime on there and you have been actively using your boat, we would come out and take a look at your boat. I would come out and take a look at your boat in this area. Okay? Yes, sir. I'm sorry, I forgot to get back to you. Okay. Yep.
And then I was using Unipoxy Plus, it was told, no, that's just for warmer water, it's the same. You don't need
Copper level. You're getting into the copper levels?
but most recently here, I've been using
Trinidad. Mm-hmm.
and is Unipoxy now Trinidad?
Well, I'll go the other way. Unipoxy was Trinidad Light. Was the best way to say it. We still sell it. Yeah, we have it under, it's called Unipoxy HRT. Okay? We've changed that formula a little bit to the point where it's not a true hard bottom paint. Like I told you, the only true hard bottom paint we have is the Trinidad. We've kind of made Unipoxy be a hybrid type of product as well. So it's a little lightly softer, but it has a lower amount of copper. So again, the costs are a little bit lower there. So I would probably stick with the Trinidad because of the heavier load.
Somebody told me that the yard, if you buy the paint from the yard can get a higher price. Is that true with their paint?
It used to be that way. No, not anymore. Not anymore. We used to have a black and white label, more or less. We called it the professional label. And we basically had something for the boatyards. And then, of course, we had the retail label for the stores, when there was a West Marine store, a Boaters World, an EMB, and who am I missing? Boat US. There was those four were out there. We had a retail label, and then we had a boatyard label. West Marine is the only one left. So we kind of isolated it back down to being that label. You still see glimpses of it a little bit. We still have a few of those white labels out there, but anybody can buy them now. Mm-hmm. We used to have it that way, yeah. We kind of gave the boatyard to fight against those retailers fighting each other for lower prices. In some of them it was stronger and better, and some of it was the same, okay? But it had a little bit of a better price to have the boatyards compete with the large mass merchants out there. But that's all gone. That's all gone.
Sad day when you stop using tin, I think. Does the military
No, no. Yep, yep. Every once in a while, they'll find some, and then they'll auction it off, and then we have problems. Because the pleasure craft people will buy it, saying it's the greatest paint ever. And then when they put it on top of our paints or vice versa, we have what we call mud cracking, because they don't like each other. They remember how I just told you the Hydrocoat is the most compatible paint out there? Those paints are not. And then we have that problem all the time. Okay? It was great paint. We made it. That was probably right when I first came on board. Those were going away because of EPA rulings and everything else. Again, remember my catch-22 of we're trying to make something that keeps your boat clean, and it's a pesticide, and we're polluting the waters at the same time. The TBTs really killed the fish. Yes, sir. Indefinite. And this is follow me on this. If you have a half a can left over and you don't clean the rim of that can very well and air can attack it, it's probably going to gel up and not be any good. But I have yet to find a paint, and I still have some at home that are, I have some of that black and white label that gentleman was talking about. It's 10 years old, it's still good. I've never opened it. The paint will settle because of the copper load and the heavy paints that are in there. But if you do the hourglass effect every other month or something like that, take your can and flip it over. Okay, what's going to happen is gravity is going to take that can and what was on the bottom, make it slough down to the top, so to speak. It's not mixing it, but it's keeping all of those metals wet, so it's going to be easier to mix. Okay? Yes, sir. I have mine in my shed. I have mine in my pickup in 90 degrees and everything else. I haven't had any problems. I've driven with the stuff. Actually, the best thing for me to do is when I take paint, old paint, I put it in my truck. The first thing I do is I make sure it's upside down, because just the movement of the truck and the rattling and everything else actually helps settle it back down to the other side. So take your paint for a ride. No, I'm just teasing you. Okay? But that is one of those tricks that I've learned from the time, as long as it's good. But if you open up the can and you can't seal up the lid that very well, you might have a problem with it next year. Okay? What you can do is if you open it up, they're all going to be a little sludgy. Any paint's going to be that. If you have to use it, even house paint, wall paint, ceiling paint, anything, add a little bit of our solvent, our 120 thinner solvent. It's kind of like our all-purpose solvent. It is expensive, but for what you're paying for that paint already, might as well keep that half a gallon a can, which is costing you $150, and you reuse it for the next year or the following time you need it. The water base, guess what the thinner is for that? Still water. I usually don't recommend tap water just because there's so many metals in all our tap water. So just go to Sam's or Costco's or whatever and get one of those little bottles for $1 and just pour it on the top and mix it in. Bloxygen. No, I haven't. Okay. Uh-huh. Oh, to suck out for the vacuum? And close it in. Yeah. Right. Right. It creates a vacuum, more or less. Mm-hmm. And yes, you're right, because I have heard of that, because I did a varnish seminar last year, and a lot of people save their varnishes that way. Mike, did somebody over here have their hand raised? Okay. We want to keep going? Okay.
This may be off the subject.
Oh, boy.
One of the Navy paint aircraft carriers to go out there and stay overboard for years and years and years and years. Because I know the shipyard doesn't bring them back in before a trial trip anymore.
Well, again, by that point, they're just moving all the time, like I told you, up here.
When you're sitting at the pier, when you're working on it for 18 months after it's been launched.
They would have their team of divers go down and scrub it.
And clean it up.
I don't think we have a team of divers to go down and scrub our boats. But yeah, that's kind of, but the bigger boats, yes, they do haul them out, because I've been on some government jobs. I've never been for an aircraft carrier, but they can get some pretty large boats out for re-bottom painting them. Any other questions about bottom paint? Have I answered? Anybody else have like a situation or something they want to, even if it's the other guy's paint, I will answer it. Okay? I kind of wanted to keep this, like I said, generic. Mike also wanted me to talk about epoxies and repair epoxies. Anybody have to bury or coat their bottom or anything of that nature? You guys do? Okay. All right.
I built my boat, and it's plywood and epoxy,
Okay.
and I just finished a pretty major refit,
Okay.
took all the paint off,
Okay.
down to the epoxy,
Okay.
and I used the Protect
Yep.
as a barrier coat.
Yep.
Not that epoxy and,
Well, that is an epoxy. That is one of them that I want to talk about.
I mean, you don't get blistering usually because it's an epoxy product as opposed to a polyester or vinyl ester.
Right. Well, that's what I want to get to.
But we'll see. I put it on just as belt and suspenders.
Okay. Okay. All right. And you have one too, as well? Okay. Hard paint. Yes, it is. To the pocket, to the wallet. Yes, it is. Yeah. Right. So they broke it down. They probably got into the gel coat a little bit, so that's why they needed to put epoxy on. And how many coats of epoxy did they put on? Do you remember? 2? Okay. 5 done. Okay. How many have you had? 7? Okay. Why I'm asking that question, I want to show you. Like, why do we need so many coats of epoxy on there? Okay. What the epoxy is supposed to do, the Petit Protect or the Inner Protect, and then with Seahawks, tough stuff. They're all supposed to build up to try to give you some sealant. So what I kind of call it is they're called coats for a reason. You put on one coat, it's kind of like your t-shirt. You put on your second coat, it's your sweatshirt. You put on your third coat, is actually your jacket. So you're sealing yourself up to get warm. It's kind of the same thing with the coats of epoxy. And I have this little thing I wanted to show you, where a lot of people say, well, why do I need so many coats? Hold on one second. Okay. This is coat number 1. All right. Can you guys all see that? It looks pretty good. Oop. Little see-through, right? Sorry, I put the mic down. But let me show you. Come on, Brian. Just after just one coat of epoxy, sorry.
Yep,
Okay? Can you guys all see that?
yep.
All right, that's just one coat. Looks pretty good. You can kind of see a little bit of see-through, right? But the problem is you know, that should be enough. This is probably only about 3 mils dry. This is thinner than a piece of paper. Okay?
Can you put on a thicker coat the first time to make it better, or is it
You
better?
can, but then you're going to have more orange peel. You're going to have a very rough texture. So what we end up doing is you got to use like a 3/8 snap roller. We don't want it any thicker than that, because if you use like a 3/4 snap or an inch roller, which they do make, you're going to have it very rough texture. Could run and sag. Now, if you guys can see that this is coat number 2. Still got some little hiding spots. Yeah, a little here and there. Now, again, this is a couple things. It's human air. I always use human air. We're never going to get it completely correct everywhere we go. But you can see why you might need 7 coats of epoxy. And then I got one more, just the third one. Usually what we recommend is 3 coats if you're doing a blister job, at least 3 coats. I'll probably use the word at least, or that term, depending on how it is. There might be 1 or 2 little spots here or there, but can you guys all see that? See how you're putting them on and they build up? Okay. Now, if you really want to make sure you have enough on there, you can put it that thick. This is what I mixed it in, and everything else, this is what was left over, okay? And it popped right out of everything else. But you can see why you might need that many coats. And it all depends really on your boat. If it was that severe for, you could go up. 7 coats is probably, that's good enough. By that time, you've got everything at least once or twice, okay? But we usually recommend about 3 coats if it's a blister job, okay? We have a 1 coat, 2 coat, and a 3 coat system, and then more. 1 coat is a tack coat. If you just want to use where you lightly sand the boat, a brand new boat, you put 1 coat on. It actually will bond better to the boat, and then your bottom paint will bond better to the epoxy than the sanding, okay? Usually what we call a 2 coat would be a blister prevention, where it's a brand new boat, doesn't have any blisters, and you put 2 coats on, and then like I said, it's putting your t-shirt on and then your sweatshirt on. You have a little bit more protection than just that gel coat. And then any type of repair job that you need to do, 3 or more, depending on the severity of your boat, okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. The tricky part of this is the primers. They have a window, an open window time of working on themselves for about 2 weeks. So if you coat on a coat today, you would have to get the second coat on at least in 2 weeks from now, or it'll dry so hard that that second coat won't adhere to the first coat. Does that make sense? Okay. And on and so on and so on and so on, depending on how many you need. The more important would be the bottom paint. They don't blush. They don't blush. Nope. I will in a minute. I will in a minute. But the most important thing is the last coat of primer, that wherever you're at, and the first coat of bottom paint need to be done in the same day. Okay? The window is that short, depending on, I don't care what the temperature is outside. You've got to get it done with that. The last coat of primer and the very first coat of bottom paint need to be done in the same day. Usually a day like today, which is in the 40 degrees, you probably have about a 6 or 8 hour window to wait for the bottom paint to go on top of that last coat of primer. Yesterday, which was 80 degrees, probably about a 2 hour window. Okay? So just remember, if you guys have any projects like that, and this works for my primer and the other guy's primers as well, you've got to catch that window. What you're doing is you're binding the two together. The solvents from the top side, or the bottom paint, are kind of softening that last coat of primer so they can bond together. That's how it works. If you wait till the next day, the epoxy primers are so hard that that solvent won't saturate and suck in and hold on to that paint, and you will have adhesion problems. Does that make sense? You can, or put another coat of primer on there, which doesn't hurt, and it's a little bit simpler than to sand that whole boat again. You can put on as many coats as you want. But again, the simplicity for the cost, the time, the value, and your elbow and your shoulder from sanding, I would put another coat of primer on and then try to catch that window. The simplicity of that. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I thought when you put these on, I thought they had to put it on within a certain short window of time.
No, on themselves, they have like a 2-week window. Some even have longer than that. Whoa, okay. God bless you. So, but that's probably a little bit overkill too, because now you had so much product on there in one day, you didn't have a chance for all those primers to evaporate out enough to set up properly. As long as it's good and tight and it's hard, you're good to go. But sometimes that could be where you've painted and you're painting and you're painting and you're painting. You didn't get a chance for coat 1 to completely evaporate or set up before you put coat 2 on. So it'll all dry, it'll feel dry to the touch, but sometimes they might be soft where you can kind of peel them a little bit and that type of thing. So you got to be careful of that. But if it's worked, that's fine. Do it again? All right, well, what I would do for you, just take the paint off. You probably have enough primer, 1 coat of primer, and then go with paint. Any other questions over here? How am I doing with time, Mike? All right. The other repair epoxies, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I need my hands. Has anybody seen this in the stores or anything? It's called Flex Epoxy. Anybody use ProSet or West System epoxies? Anybody use any of those type of products? A couple hands. There's one called 610. They also have one, anybody, G-Flex? Heard of it? System 3 guy. Pro Set? Okay. Okay, well, there's two, Pro Set and 610. Those are two epoxies. And then there's also G-Flex. Okay, they all have their certain purposes for them, but they're all bonding agents and everything else. Actually, what this is all 3 in 1. Okay, G-Flex is an adhesive epoxy that they have that actually has some flexibility to it, which this has. The Pro Set is like a bonding issue type of thing. It's a thin set mortar that basically can put two pieces together real tight, which this can do. And then you also have the 610, which is a little bit of a thickener agent that can do like overhead projects or side projects without dripping and drooping, non-sagging, which this can do as well. Can go on any type of substrate. The only substrate I've seen this not really bond to, it will, but then it'll release is any type of oily plastics. So starboard, excuse me. It will bond, but it will release after. Well, what happens is they're oily. They basically release out these oils, and then they protrude, and then it kind of releases this off of it. But I want to just show you guys this. This is one of these simple little epoxies that can do a lot of repair to your boat, and it's all in this one little can. That's one little tube, okay? So, Mike, I don't know if you wanted to hold this, or I'm going to show.
I'm your lovely assistant.
Yeah, okay.
Better web.
I'll hold it one more time. Okay. That's what I'm showing you. It is a two-part epoxy. And basically what this is the cutout. Whew, trying to do this. It's a cutout. So that's actually what's inside there. Okay? These are called Utah cartridges. I don't know if they were made in Utah. I don't know how that came about, but they're called Utah cartridges. So what you get in here, unfortunately, isn't going to be 9 or 10 or 11 ounces. It's going to be about 6. Okay? It's going to be right here. Okay? What you've got is this tube that's inside here is the hardener, and then wrapped around it like a donut or a bagel is the base, is the part A. Okay? And as it comes through the caulking gun, I'm going to push through. It's going to push everything through these chambers.
That's a mixing bowl.
See the two chambers? Okay? It'll come out there. We do what we have called a mixer. Thought I had one. There it is. You can put this on top. Okay? I don't like using this because this is a one-time use. Can you still hear me back there? Okay. Because once you pump it out, what's in here, it's stuck. How are you going to get the rest out? Okay? You can use them, and they will help you mix. I'm going to show you on a board how quick this is. So, and you're only getting 6 ounces. Look how long this mixing tube is. You're probably losing 20% of your product right here. Okay? So what I'm going to do is hand it over to Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Mike's got the mic. And let me get.
This is the demo portion of the show.
This is the demo. Okay. Oh, well, let me fix my light. Who told me to take care of my light? Come on. There we go.
Waiting for all the ads to run.
That's right. So again, I'm going to unscrew it.
Mike, I'd like to buy a valve.
Now what I'm going to do is squirt it down. Real quick. Just going to clean this up. Well, that's yep. So I got some goo in and everything else, no big deal. A lot of times when you open these epoxies, once you open them, they get exposed. You can't use them again. I'll throw this in my truck and do it at the next demo. Okay? The other thing I like is a clean table. Put those over here real quick. So here it is right here. See that? Now you're right here. Can you smell this? No? Okay. All right. Mike? So I'm going to use this mic as a supermodel.
Hey, I like my hair.
Okay? I haven't even mixed it yet, so there's no sag, no drip, no droop, even before I mix it. So this is the part I like to do, and I always call this my Bob Ross. How many people remember Bob Ross? Okay, all right. Sorry I don't have the hair like he used to anymore, but I'm going to take my lavender blue and my clear, and I'm going to start mixing this, and unfortunately it's a blue board. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, so I want to come over to you guys. You see that lavender, right? What's happening with that lavender?
Looks like it's turning white.
It's clear, okay? So we know when there's a mix. We know when we have the thorough mix. You know some of those epoxies where you have like a golf ball size of this and a pea of that and you mix it in? Do you really know if you truly have it mixed in? We have this already measured out, okay? It's ready to go. And again, over here, my supermodel. So we definitely can do overheads.
His mother's having a heart attack back there.
But this is one of those repair epoxies that I really, really like. You can do a lot of things with this. A lot of people, who's my 5200 guy here, said I use 5200 on a lot of stuff. Was that you? And I thought there was somebody else. This is one of those things, a lot of people on their sailboat ooze out that 5200 between the keel and the belly of the boat, and it always cracks and everything else. This has the strength and the flexibility that won't happen anymore. So you can kind of use this as a bonding agent for all those things.
How long does it take to harden?
Well, that's a good question. It takes about 24 hours for the fact that we call it flex epoxy. Most epoxies have energy, okay, and they'll cook more or less. And we might even have some smoke and some smell. Again, I can smell a little bit, but can you smell it? Really smell it from there? Can you guys really smell it from there? Okay. There's very little solvent in here, so we don't have that problem of odor or anything else. So you can use it indoors. Your question is how long? It takes about 24 hours for it to set up. Now, it depends on how deep you use it too. Something of this nature, that thick, it's probably going to take a little bit longer. You come back the next day, it'll be dry to the touch, but it'll still feel spongy, still feel a little soft because it's still setting up. But it's one of those things that you can use for a gazillion different repairs. I'll get to your question. One more thing. Let me do a little. This product was actually designed for wood, for the reason that wood expands and contracts. Well, that's where the flex part comes into this. As wood dries out, it's going to shrink a little bit. Okay. So instead of what hard epoxies would do is they would stay in place and splinter that wood, which way the wood was breaking apart from each other. Where this is actually going to stretch like a rubber band to a certain degree. Then, if the wood gets wet and it pushes it back to each other, it'll go back to its original form and place. So it's a very good product. That's where the G-Flex and the West Systems had. Now again, the other product was, as you can see, I can put that on pretty darn thin, can't I? Yep. Okay, and this would bond two products. And then I already showed for my supermodel how thick I can be doing upside down. Okay, so this is one of those epoxy. This belongs in everybody's toolbox.
What's the name of it again?
It's called Flex Epoxy. Okay.
Blush?
Blush, there isn't any blush. Again, because that was the solvents. That's everything that's coming through. So there's very little in there. You don't have to worry about that amine blush that comes around. Very much waterproof.
You use it to tear in a cast iron keel.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
How's it sound?
And that's where it's tenacious. It is if it's completely cured, it's going to be a little bit hard to sand. But if you keep it flush, don't crown it, more or less. Basically, try to get it as fair as you can. The sanding should be very easy. You can use any type of grit.
They can sand it while it's still a little.
No, you have to let it hard up. Paintable to the point where you can actually dab a few dabs of colorant or paint in there, and you can use it as your first coat of primer. Okay. Very proud. Very proud. This is, to me, probably Petit's best kept secret. Huh? It's about $40-some, $45. You get about 6 ounces, and that's the problem. This sits with all the other caulks, and you walk by it, and that caulk costs you 15, this one costs you maybe 20, this one, then they get to this one, $45, you walk away because we haven't shown it. And that's one of those things that it comes out. West System has all their great films and everything else. I have something that can kill 3 of their products where you don't need to buy all 3, let alone what other. This is one of those things that belongs in everybody's toolbox. You can color it a little bit, yeah. Don't saturate it, just a couple dabs of paint for that little bit of product. Gel coat cracks and everything else. Now this is a true epoxy. We can't put any type of gel coat resin on top of it, okay? Because all epoxies will attack those, all those gel coat resins will attack epoxies and soften them. But you can fill those cracks and then paint over it, no problem. Prime it, paint it, whatever you need to do. Okay?
Say it's made for wood, could you use it on plastic or something?
Just about everything but oily plastics. I don't know if they have. I really don't know if they have. Like I said, it's Petit's one of Petit's best kept secrets, so maybe they don't even know about it. You can begin to smell it, and how long has it been? 10 minutes? Now it's just because it's sitting here. And the other question I'm going to answer you didn't ask, you want to know how long you have to work with it, right? Yeah. So basically, it's as long as you've got it mixed, do your repair. If I keep playing with it like this, I'm forcing air into this product, and I'm going to lose some of that. It'll start to sag, so I can't go over to my supermodel and go over there if I keep mixing it. Okay? So basically, once you've got it mixed, do what you need to do, and in probably about a half hour in this type of environment, you probably have it. It'll start to harden up. And so only mix up what you need and what you can. Unfortunately, it only comes in the tube because we have it measured out to be correct. It's a 2-to-1. So if somebody eyeballs it, if we had it in a can and a quart and a pint, and they tried to do it on their own, they might not have the right mix. It might not harden. It might not do anything. So it only comes in this. This isn't one of these projects that you can do a large scale. This is that when you just need a little bit of an epoxy, okay, or any repair. Did we have a finger over there? Yeah, absolutely. That's what I have. We have easy epoxy over there. Okay. Yes, sir. I'm just going to go over there. Going to wipe my hands, but keep talking.
How forgiving is the mixture, though? I mean, because I've worked with epoxy a long time, and
Okay.
I'm left with the impression that part A, part B is 1-1 or 2-1, fairly forgiving. You put a number on that, how forgiving, and I just thought it was very. They seem to be pretty forgiving. Blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Sure, it seems to work.
Well, that's why we have it only in the tube. It is not as forgiving as some other things. That's why it's only in the tube. We already have it measured out. We have the proper amount for A and B, the whole bit. It is a little forgiving because usually the first push through on a new tube like this, they're probably going to be a little off. So there's probably a little bit of margin of error, but to the point where this is the only way it comes. So it's not as forgiving as you might think. We can't make it in. Right, right. We've got it all weighed out for you right now. Yeah, yeah. But you can do it by weight. Sometimes volume 1-to-1 doesn't mean by sight. Sometimes what you're saying volume is weight 1-to-1. Where? Right. Mm-hmm. They are pretty forgiving. You don't need to. Yeah, yeah. This is just a simplicity. We've got it all done. It's all right here.
Once you open that, how long does that last?
I'm going to put this back in my truck and use it maybe 2 months from now to show somebody else. This lasts forever. What'll end up happening if you've had it a long time and it's in some type of heat area, storage shed, or a truck, and stays there, the purple might dissipate a little bit, so it might be clear on clear. That might be one thing you might lose. But the strength of the product and everything, as long as you can mix it up, it's good to go.
What's the, I guess, proper technique to clean the tip?
Clean the tip, what I just did, use your knife or paint stick, just kind of clean both sides off. If you want to clean off the top there really before you seal it up. So this will be a little bit hard for me tomorrow. Next time I use this, so I'll just take my rag and pull it off. If the top seal doesn't come off, I just might use a pair of pliers to pop it off a little bit, but it'll come. There might be a little bond, but not enough, because look what it's in. It's in plastic.
Oily plastic.
Oil pack. Huh?
I say how long will that glob last? It takes 24 hours to get it hard.
24 hours. Mm-hmm.
Is that a special caulking gun, or is that the
This is a regular caulking gun that I bought at Lowe's for 15 bucks.
So you take it out of there, and then when you're
Ready to go.
How hard does it get?
Huh?
How hard does it get? When it's at,
As hard as a rock. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It does give, yep. Mm-hmm. It's just one of these little things that, it's magic. So, but it's one of these things that, I'll grab it if you need me. It's one of those things where you guys, there's so many things on a boat that tear, break or something, and you just need a little bit of glue or just need a little bit of epoxy or just need this or that. This is all in one. I'm going to throw it out. Mm-hmm. What usually happens, one reason I like these cutting boards if I keep them, guess what? They're that oily plastic as well. These are just the cheap cutting boards I got at the Walmart. All that'll get brittle, and I can just bend it, and it'll all come off and clean up. So, but I like to do presentations with a new board. What usually happens at most boat yards, and at you guys, you're going to find that box and rip off the side of the box and mix it up with that, which happens all the time with that stick. That's fine. You can do it that way too. I just, for simplicity here. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You would probably have to put a vise to it, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Couple things I've done at home with this. My rocking chair that I rocked my wife rocked my kids to sleep. The footing came out of the one arch, and we tried, wood glue, screw, and everything else. We put this in there, filled all the holes and everything else, clamped it together as best we could with one of those long clamps from the seat to the arch. The next day, it's still there.
So, is that bond good with plastic? You say you can lift that
Yep.
up and set something will pop off?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Oily plastics. Oily plastics. I put this on PVC, and it seems to work okay because that's not oily. But anything that has that feel to it, what's an oily? The best oily plastic I can say is a milk carton. That's very oily plastic. Okay, so, and that's kind of that's what I use these for. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 Well, whatever you need, because again, if you have it too hard of a clamp, you're oozing it all out. So we want it in there. So yes, you would have to follow those same type of rules. It all depends on your situation. Exactly. 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 Another one where I've used this on a couple boats is a cleat. They've tied the boat so tight that the cleat has popped off and everything else. Now they've got this big hole and the gel coat's out and everything else. That hole's pretty deep. So I'll force all this stuff in there as best I can. That would probably be the only time that I would probably use one of these, is if you've got that tiny hole and you want to inject it in. But I basically knifed it all in there, flushed it as best I could with the surface on top, let it cure for 2 days, and then what we did was we tapped back into this Flexpoxy right where the cleat was, right where that hole was, and we put the cleat right back where it was before. We were done.
How thick or thin do you want it between the two together?
It can be as thin as you need it or as thick as you want it. That's what I'm saying, because that's what the West systems are. They have one for thin, they have a thicker one, and then they have a flexible one. This does all three. You can put it on very thin, you can put it on very thick, or you can use it for just practically any type of small, minor repair, because it only comes in this size.
Have you ever used any of that stuff called Cool Chem?
No.
You know what those are?
Yeah. No, I have not. Okay.
Use that stuff for decades.
Okay.
Pretty good, but it's,
Okay. Have you ever used my fairing compound?
not on that. I didn't even know what that stuff existed.
I could do the same thing. This is the fairing compound, comes in the same tube, okay? Now this is it comes in, I'll just demo the one. Same tube, everything's the same. As you can see, it's gray and white in there. Everybody can see that as far as I can make it. Same kind of concept here. We have the gray is the smaller cylinder tube, and then the white is the one that's around like a donut. It's a 2-to-1 mix just like this. If I mixed it up, the gray would get into the white, and there you would have for your fairing. Uniformly, just like I did this one and the whole bit. Now, fairing compound, this is designed for blister repair. That's what this has specifically. So this can go below the water line. You can use it for above the water line and do top sides. Are we almost close? This also comes in cans, where this is very forgiving, where it's still a 2-to-1, but you can eyeball this and do it on your own. That's where I was getting with this. Thank you very much. Where this one's a little harder to sand, but can do the same job as this one, but this would be more specific for that, for sandability. That's exactly where I was going with this. This is an epoxy. Yes, it is. Mm-hmm. And this is waterproof. Absolutely. Any type of blister job and everything else. And if you look, boy, there's some over there. If somebody needs some, okay?
I've actually used this stuff
Mhm.
when I haul the boat, and I did pair my keel with it. I don't know how you feel about this, but I tell people to use it. Whatever tool you're using, throw it away. Because you will not get that stuff off.
Right.
I don't know why. Okay. Been a little more than an hour. I'm going to close this kind of officially. I'm sure Brian's be happy to stand up here. You can come talk. You keep asking questions. Oops, sorry. Rick says I wasn't holding the mic, and I wasn't. I thought this was my lovely young assistant this time, you know. Okay, Mr. Brian, I'm going to ask Carla to come up here because she is the lovely young assistant.
Hi. The Seaford Yacht Club would like to thank you for being a speaker on our Seadog series. And as such, we will be donating a book to the Yorktown Library in your name. Since the library is kind of trying to get back started up, I don't have the name of your book. But as soon as I do, I will send it to you.
Sure.
So here you are.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Did you?